Welcome to Is That Homeopathy, where ancient wisdom meets modern healing. We're here to demystify homeopathy and share practical, heart-centered insights for your holistic journey. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. I'm Astral Meadow.
And I am Ashley Sedorovich, and we are the hosts of Is That Homeopathy. Today on the channel, we have a great show in store for you. We're talking about what is homeopathy. And I am sure that many of you have heard of Arnica before. Arnica is kind of like the gateway into homeopathy, or maybe you've even been in the store and seen that big display that has all the little blue tubes. I know when I first was brought into the sphere of homeopathy, I remember seeing them in one of our local markets, and they had this big display of all of these organized remedies that were stacked in these little tubes. And I'm like, what are these things? How do they work? And it was just like, I don't know, I was just like drawn to them right from the start.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people work with it and they don't even realize what it actually is. And they might pick up a Highlands cough syrup and it has a couple homeopathic remedies in it, but they're not actually certain on what are these remedies? Why are these the ones that they're selecting for this? So on this channel, we are going to break down what is homeopathy and help you all understand practical ways of applying it and working with the principles that are the foundation of this system of medicine.
Yeah, so you mentioned the Highlands cough syrup, and I think one of the big things that comes up in discussion that I see a lot and that I know that I'm talking about a lot is Highlands cough syrup really homeopathy, or is that a natural, more of just a natural remedy, right? So
Right.
is it truly homeopathy and using the principles, the homeopathic principles, or is it marketing at that
Right.
point, right?
So homeopathy goes beyond just the remedies themselves.
Yeah, I would
It's
agree
how
with that.
we apply the principles that makes it homeopathy. So if you take 17 different homeopathic remedies in your cough syrup, even though the remedies are created through the process of how we create remedies, if you are combining them and not applying them with the principles in mind, then it's not homeopathy, which I do love that as the name of
Yeah,
our channel
yeah,
because
yeah.
it is so often that I see people in groups and that are, and they're like, "Oh, I'm using homeopathy." And then they'll go through what they're doing and I'm like, that's not homeopathy, but I'm
No,
very
no.
happy that you're open-minded to holistic healing because
Yeah,
that's a thing.
that's a starting point for sure. So then what is homeopathy, right? So if that's not homeopathy, what is it? And so I think let's say the most concise way to summarize homeopathy, because homeopathy is many things. There are many, many texts written on homeopathy in a very well outlined document called the Organon that will tell you in detail everything homeopathy is. Um, but essentially, homeopathy is its own complete system of healing, and it's been around for hundreds of years, originally developed by Dr. Samuel Hahnemann, who's a fascinating, fascinating German physician. He has a really interesting history that one day, hopefully, we'll be able to dive a little bit deeper on in the show. And he believed strongly in treating people based off of the principle of like cures like. And that principle is really one of the core foundations of what homeopathy is.
So,
And
with like cures like, this can be defined as the substance that causes certain symptoms in a healthy person can actually help heal those symptoms in someone who is sick when prepared in a specific way. So, the
so,
symptoms themselves guide us into matching that remedy to that person's ailment at that moment.
so for example, then like a red onion, right? So,
Hmm.
and I think everybody can kind of relate to this. If you're chopping up onions, it tends to make your eyes water and your nose run, right? I know we've all been there crying over our onions before.
Right. So the remedy Allium cepa is actually made from a red onion, and it is actually going to be a good match for people who are presenting symptoms like that. So that is a really great practical example of what we're looking for as far as the physical symptoms presented, that would match what that remedy would cause in a healthy person. So if you're chopping up an onion, you're going to be crying and your eyes might be burning. And if you're having allergy symptoms that are presenting that same way, then the onion would be the best match potentially for those symptoms, those symptom expressions.
So how exactly does that work though? Because we're not using the actual onion, right?
Right.
We're because the onion is what's causing the symptoms at that point. The onion's not relieving the symptoms. But how do we go from that substance causing the symptoms to now the substance is relieving those symptoms? I think that that's kind of where it starts to get really interesting because if you look at how homeopathy works across the spectrum, right? You've got something that causes it, and at the same time, that thing, be it plant, mineral, or animal, also relieves it. But how do we go from point A to point B?
Right. So the remedies are not used in their raw form, they're diluted, sometimes to the point where there's not even a molecule left of the original substance. This is really challenging to the way we think because we are raised up in the allopathic model, which means healing through opposites. So with homeopathy, we're healing through the law of similars. And so right out the gate, you're already kind of challenging the constructs of how you view healing. Um, so why don't you go into potentization a little bit?
Yeah, so we dilute them through that process of potentization, where basically we're taking a portion of the substance and we're putting it into a solvent or a liquid base, if you will. And then we're shaking it really vigorously or banging it on, like you'll hear people talk about banging it on a book or banging it on a hard substance. And that piece is called succussion. So it's essentially we're just repeating that pattern, right? So we take that bottle then that we've succussed, we take a drop from there, and then we put it into that a new bottle of, let's say, like alcohol, and then we shake it again. So we take the diluted version now and we dilute it again, and then we succuss it again, and then we keep going through that until we reach the actual potency that we're going for. And there, gosh, we could spend a whole episode alone on potentization, but
Yes.
there are many, there's many different levels of dilution ratios. So you'll hear of C potencies or X potencies or M potencies or LM potencies or Q potencies, and they all are different, different dilution rates that span, from 1 to 10 dilution rate to a 1 to 50,000 dilution rate. And each of those then work on a different, uh, let's say, level in the body. So some work on a more energetic plane, some work on a more physical plane. Um, and then depending upon how the body is responding, we would look at how the body is responding to whatever, stimulus is causing it to be off balance, and that would help us kind of select our potency, um, depending on if it's a more physical or a more energetic um, ailment, if you will.
Yeah. So it sounds a little far out there, but the process is actually very structured, not only in creating the remedies, but in the way that we go about selecting our remedies. And what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to stimulate the body's natural healing response. We're wanting to activate our own vital force, and then the body is able, once it's responded, to start the healing process all on its own. So less can actually be more. Um, and if you go back to how Hahnemann came about this, he was working with cinchona bark, and he found that when using the cinchona bark in healing, it was helping people, but it was also having some side effects involved. And so what he did is he kept diluting it. And each time he would dilute it, it would become stronger as far as on the healing level, but then the people wouldn't have the side effects. So he continued this. And then over time, the succussion came in. And so it was a very like scientific way of exploring these remedies through the scientific method. So actually what we know of as like case studies and things like that comes out of Hahnemann's research with some of these remedies. So like we can actually pay homage to him for being, the first case study in homeopathy because he was doing it on himself first, and that's how he noticed these healing responses. So there is a lot of science involved in how it works.
I absolutely love that story of the first time that he used that because if you think about it, like we're in this very technology forward like space and time where we can go and we can research, we can hop on the internet and research anything and have an answer just like that, right? Like how does this XYZ phenomenon work? And if you think about, 200 years ago when Hahnemann was developing this, he didn't have the internet to go to
Mhm.
say, hey, just dilute this remedy a little bit more and it's going to work on an even deeper level. I mean, to think about like the brilliance that this man had to like put those things together just absolutely blows my mind. But I think that that's all part of like the beauty of homeopathy, right? Like he was so passionate about it and so passionate about the patient's well-being.
Yeah.
He didn't want a system that was going to overwhelm the body or hurt the body or make the body feel worse. He wanted to develop a system that worked very deeply and worked very gently. And I just think that that's so profound to think about and to understand like when you're going into care like like under homeopathic care, right? And you think even about like the concept of what is homeopathy. Well, if it's harming you and it's
Mhm.
hurting you, then it's probably not homeopathy either. Or it's not, the principles are not being applied
Mhm.
correctly.
Right. So if the person is actually more distressed for long periods of time after a remedy, then that's not homeopathy. We're wanting a gentle and sometimes permanent cure, not making them even worse than when they started, which some allopathic models,
Mhm.
the side effects to some of the options can sometimes be worse than the original um, problem, which is why Hahnemann actually rejected the medical system of his day and went to exploring other avenues because um, he couldn't ethically enforce those models onto his patients, things like bloodletting, um, and the leeches and all the stuff. And like at that time, he was like, the person is not any better. They're like close to death, and that's why their symptoms have stopped because they're about to cross over. So, we have some of that in our model today, certain drugs that might actually cause more harm. So, one of the key principles is do no harm, which is the Hippocratic Oath, which all medical communities are informed on, but he took that very seriously. So right out the gate, he had a really high moral compass to actually help people without making it worse. So, another big difference between conventional medicine and homeopathy is that it is individualized.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, this is so big. And so, two people may come in with, well, I guess before I go down that, one thing I do think it's important to call out is that homeopathy also doesn't concern itself with diagnoses, right?
Right.
So we say two people may come in experiencing migraines, or two people may come in experiencing what they're called the flu. And in homeopathy, that doesn't really matter. The diagnosis doesn't really matter because we're looking at the individual suffering, right?
Hmm.
And so even though two people may have what they're collectively referring to as the flu, how each of them individually experience that is going to be completely different. And that means that there's the potential that even though both have the flu, they
Hmm.
could be walking away with two completely different remedies because we're not just treating the most common symptoms of the flu, we're treating the specific symptoms that individual is experiencing. And so, like in one case, it may be that their symptoms may be more head like centered, and some they may have flu symptoms that are more like GI or stomach centered, right?
Right. There's many expressions of it. And so, first red flag is that homeopathy. When you are in a group and someone says, I have the flu, and they say, take gelsemium for the flu, well, the proper thing to do might be, why don't you read about gelsemium and see if your symptoms match that? And so I feel like as homeopaths, we're constantly combating in the comment sections of these posts because there's someone and they're like, well, when my kid had the flu, gelsemium was perfect. Well, that expression of the flu probably matched the remedy gelsemium to a T. But like you said, there's, so many flu remedies, right? Remedies that could potentially help a flu patient.
Yeah.
However, there's so, I mean, and now that I am a homeopath, I notice it more. So I just had the flu, and this one was totally like sinusy. And I was like, wait, this is weird because, like, I know I have the flu right now, but I've never had it present this way. And so my remedy was different than my daughter's remedy, who also had the flu. Even though
Hmm.
we're in the same household, we were exposed at the same time. And so it is important to take the whole case. So we'll definitely do some episodes in the future about case taking and things to look for that's going to help you select that the closest match to the symptom expression of your particular ailment.
Yeah. So I think key takeaway, and I think Ashley really hit the nail on the head with this, is that if someone says to you in response to you telling them that you're sick with XYZ ailment, and they say to you, take this remedy, that is not homeopathy. Because, like you mentioned, homeopathy would be taking the whole case and understanding the symptom picture across the entire, all of the body's systems,
Mhm.
to help you select what remedy matches those best in that specific expression of the flu. Um,
Right. Which is why the diagnosis itself doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that
yeah,
you went and got tested for flu A and it was positive. What matters is how did it start? What symptoms are presented? If you have snot, what color is it? How does this pain feel in your body? And that's what makes it so individual because even down to the way you experience pain might be different than somebody else. Somebody else might, have an ache and somebody else might have a throb and all of that becomes a part of individuating the whole process. So,
yeah, yeah. And I think that that's, at the end of the day, I think that that's ultimately like one of the reasons why we're looking at, making this channel and getting that information out there, right? Like so much of this is misunderstood
mhm.
and incorrectly applied. And I mean, I think I kind of speak for both of us when I say that, we're both extremely passionate and have seen the benefit of homeopathy. and how it can truly change a person or a family's life. And so, we one of our goals with this is to get this information out there in a way that people can understand it and people can start using it and people can tell the difference between what is good classical homeopathy practice and what is not, to help preserve, the to help preserve the essence of homeopathy, right? So
Right, so we'll be breaking down common misconceptions on this channel, doing remedy spotlights, and also giving you some real life case studies and some science-based breakdowns. So we'll be covering the whole spectrum of what is homeopathy on this channel.
yeah, and so I think it'll be a great place, whether you're curious. I think it'll be good for people that may be a bit skeptical about it or may think that it's, a fringe topic. Or I think it'll be really good for people that are looking to round out their natural, and holistic, healthcare practices. It'll be a great place for people to come to be able to feel empowered to take care of themselves and their family. So if you fall into one of those categories, I think you've definitely landed in the right place. And if you don't fall into one of those categories, I still think you've landed in the right place because there's a whole wealth of knowledge here that, I think will be great for anybody to become aware of.
Absolutely. And in closing, I would like to just add homeopathy is safe, it's effective, it's used by millions of people all around the world, but most people do not actually understand how deep it really goes.
So if you've ever wondered, wait, is that homeopathy? Then definitely hit subscribe because we have so much more to share.
Yes, I'm so excited to explore this more with you all.
Yeah, me as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in to Is That Homeopathy, where ancient wisdom meets modern insight. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might be curious too. If you have any questions or topics you'd like for us to explore, drop them in the comments. We're here to keep the conversation flowing. Until next time, stay curious, stay balanced, and remember, healing begins with awareness.